When my mother-in-law changed the locks on the house I bought, I stood on the porch holding my newborn son and realized some wars aren't fought with guns, but with paperwork, pride, and silence. The key she dangled from her hand that day gleamed in the afternoon sun like something sacred, something stolen. I remember the sound it made when she slipped it into her purse, the soft clink that felt louder than thunder. My husband, Daniel, stood between us, eyes fixed on the ground, jaw tight, saying nothing. "Don't make a scene, Clara," she said, her voice dripping with false patience. "It's still your home. You just need to understand it's under my name for now." Under her name. Those words cut deeper than I can describe. I looked at her, then at Daniel, hoping he'd step forward, say something, anything. But all he did was shift his weight, running a hand through his hair like a man caught between two fires. Our baby stirred in my arms, his tiny breath against my neck, the only thing keeping me from falling apart. That was the moment I knew. Whatever I thought family meant, I had been wrong. But before that day, before the locks, the lies, and the court papers, our life looked almost ordinary, peaceful even. Daniel and I had been married 5 years when we started house hunting. We lived in a small rented apartment above a bakery, the kind of place that always smelled faintly of bread and coffee. Mornings were slow and sweet. I'd sit by the window while Daniel made eggs, humming off-key to old Motown songs. We weren't rich, but we were content. When we found the house, it felt like a dream. A small 3-bedroom place on a quiet street with an oak tree out front and just enough space for a nursery. I remember standing in the empty living room, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor, and whispering, "This feels like ours." Daniel smiled, wrapping his arm around me. "It will be, babe. We'll make it happen." But making it happen meant borrowing. And that's where his mother, Margaret, came in. Margaret had always been complicated, the kind of woman who smiled for pictures but judged in whispers. She was fiercely protective of Daniel, her only son, and she never quite hid the fact that she thought I was lucky to have him. Whenever she visited, she'd walk around our apartment like an inspector on a mission. "You keep things tidy," she'd say, eyes scanning the corners. "That's good." A woman's home reflects her character. Still, when we told her about the house, she seemed genuinely excited. "How much?" she asked, pulling out a notepad as if she were taking minutes in a meeting. We told her the price. She nodded thoughtfully, then said, "You know, I have some savings set aside. I could help you with the down payment, but to make things clean, the deed might have to go under my name, just temporarily. Until you two are stable, I remember hesitating. Something about it felt wrong, but Daniel squeezed my hand and said, "Mom just wants to help, Clara." You know how she is with details, and that was that. I convinced myself it was temporary. That family meant trust. That soon enough, the name on that paper wouldn't matter. We moved in 2 months later. I was 6 months pregnant, full of hope and plans. I spent evenings painting the nursery pale yellow while Daniel installed baby gates and shelves. Margaret came by often with advice. She'd bring meals, rearrange furniture, and make comments that hovered between helpful and critical. "You shouldn't put the crib near the window," she'd say. "Drafts aren't good for babies." Or, "Maybe you should spend less on curtains and more on savings." I told myself she meant well. She was family, after all. When the baby arrived, our son, Oliver, she was the first person at the hospital. She held him before I even did, tears in her eyes. "My boy's boy," she whispered. It should have been a tender moment, but something about the way she said it made me uneasy, like she was claiming him. The weeks after birth blurred together. Sleepless nights, feedings, exhaustion. Daniel went back to work early, and Margaret started coming over more to help. At first, I was grateful. But soon I noticed she'd answer the door as if it were her home, rearrange the mail, even speak to the neighbors in a tone that made it sound like she lived there. "Margaret," I laughed one morning when she told the mailman to leave it on my porch. This is still my house, remember? She smiled, a tight, knowing smile. Of course, dear. For now, it was subtle at first, the way she'd correct me in front of Daniel or how she'd mention her investment when talking about the mortgage. But I brushed it off. I was tired, hormonal, trying to be a good wife and mother, until one afternoon when I found an envelope on the kitchen counter addressed to Mrs. Margaret Owens, homeowner. I froze. Homeowner. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the bank got it wrong. I called Daniel, asked casually, "Hey, why is your mom getting mail with our address on it?" He paused too long. "Probably just a clerical thing," he said. "She helped with the paperwork, remember?" His voice was calm, but I could hear the faint tremor underneath. That night, I couldn't sleep. The baby's soft breathing filled the room while my mind raced. I got up quietly, tiptoed to Daniel's office, and opened the bottom drawer where he kept the house documents. There they were, the deed papers, loan forms, insurance documents. The name on the title was hers, Margaret Owens, not ours, not mine. The pen slipped from my hand. I remember staring at that paper until my vision blurred. The truth sat there in ink and silence, and all the warmth I'd felt for this house turned cold in an instant. I went back to bed, lay beside Daniel, and listened to him breathe. I wanted to wake him, to scream, to demand answers, but instead I whispered to myself, Tomorrow I'll ask him everything." The next morning I made Daniel breakfast, eggs and toast just like always, though my hands shook as I buttered the bread. He came into the kitchen wearing his usual blue shirt and that sleepy smile I used to love. For a moment I almost pretended everything was fine, but when he sat down, I said it quietly without anger. "Daniel, why is your mother's name on the deed?" His fork froze midair. "What?" I looked straight at him. "The deed. It's under her name." I saw the documents. He set his fork down slowly, sighing like a man who'd been caught in a web of his own making. "Clara, we talked about this. It was just to help us qualify. My credit wasn't strong enough on its own, remember?" "I remember saying it was temporary," I replied, "and that we'd put it back in our names once the paperwork cleared." "That was a year ago, Daniel." He rubbed his temples, avoiding my eyes. "It's complicated. Mom's been paying the property taxes. She wants to make sure everything's stable before transferring ownership." "Stable?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean under her control?" That morning, something shifted in me, a quiet breaking, the kind that doesn't make noise but changes everything. Over the next few weeks, I watched Margaret differently. Every time she stopped by, I noticed the way she carried herself. Her keys already in her hand before she even reached the door. Her tone when she spoke about my home. "Your rose bushes need trimming," she'd say. "I'll have my gardener stop by." Or, "When I redo the kitchen next year, we'll fix that cabinet." When I redo the kitchen. Not you, not we. I started documenting things, taking photos of mail with her name, keeping copies of texts where she referred to the property as my house. I didn't even know why. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe part of me already knew where this was heading. One night, after putting Oliver to bed, I overheard Daniel on the phone in his office. He was whispering, his voice low but sharp. "Mom, you can't just—" Pause. "No, Clara doesn't know that part yet." Longer pause. "I told you I'd handle it." "Don't make this worse." I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the baby. I waited until I heard the call end before I walked in. He spun around, startled. "Clara, hey, I didn't hear you." "Who were you talking to?" "Work," he said too quickly. "Late meeting stuff." "Don't lie to me, Daniel." "I heard you say my name." His expression faltered, and for a moment guilt flashed across his face like lightning. But then he composed himself, reaching for calm. "You're tired. You're reading into things again." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stared at him until he looked away. The tension seeped into everything. The air, the walls, the way we ate dinner in silence. Even Oliver seemed to feel it. He'd cry longer, fuss more. One afternoon, Margaret came by unannounced, as usual, bringing groceries. I was holding Oliver on my hip, too exhausted to argue. She unpacked the bags like she owned the place. "You should be careful with finances," she said suddenly. "I've been reviewing the mortgage statements." I blinked. "You've been reviewing our statements?" "Well," she smiled, "it's my loan." Her words made me stop breathing for a second. "Your loan?" "Yes, dear. You and Daniel pay me and I pay the bank. That's how it's structured." I set the baby down carefully before I said anything. "Margaret, are you saying you could take this house away if you wanted to?" She looked right at me, lips curling into that polite smile she used like armor. "I wouldn't want to. But legally, yes, it's under my name. It's my responsibility. I wanted to throw her out right then, but I didn't. I just stood there, my hands trembling, feeling something inside me go cold. That night I confronted Daniel again. "She said she can take the house," I whispered, "that it's hers." He rubbed his face. "She's just being dramatic." "You know how she gets no, Daniel. She's not being dramatic. She's telling the truth." He looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. "I didn't think it mattered who the paperwork listed as long as we lived here. It matters when she's using it to control us." He didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Weeks turned into months. Margaret's visits became more frequent, her criticisms sharper. She started leaving lists on the fridge, bills to pay, things to fix, rules for Oliver's routine. I tore one down one day, furious. "Stop treating me like I'm your tenant," I snapped. She looked offended. "Clara, I'm just trying to keep order. You should be grateful I've taken so much responsibility." "Grateful?" I repeated. "You've taken everything." Her eyes hardened. "Be careful how you speak to me, dear. I could make things very difficult for you and my son." It was the first time she said it openly. The threat. The "I hold the power here" tone. From then on, I couldn't unhear it. The breaking point came on a Friday morning. I was returning from a pediatric appointment when I noticed something strange. A "for sale" sign leaning against the porch. I froze in my tracks. Margaret was standing in the yard, chatting with a man in a suit, a real estate agent. "What is this?" I asked, my voice trembling. She turned to me, calm as ever. "Just an evaluation." "Don't worry yourself. An evaluation for what?" "Options," she said lightly. "It's good to know what your property's worth these days." "My property?" She smiled. "I meant mine, dear." "Don't take everything so personally." I couldn't breathe. My hands went cold. Oliver started crying in his car seat, the sound echoing in my chest. I looked at her, at that smug serenity in her face, and realized something. She wasn't just cruel. She enjoyed control. She thrived on it. That night, I told Daniel I wanted to see the full loan documents. He hesitated, but I insisted. After an hour of tense silence, he handed them over. I read every line. The loan was indeed in her name. She was listed as the sole owner. We were occupants with no legal claim. I felt sick, betrayed by her, yes, but also by him. "You knew," I whispered. "All this time, you knew." Daniel tried to reach for me, his voice breaking. I thought it didn't matter. "I just wanted us to have a home." "It's not a home if someone else holds the key, Daniel." That night, I packed a small bag for me and Oliver. I didn't know where we were going yet. Maybe my sister's for a few days, maybe nowhere at all. But I knew one thing. If I stayed, I'd lose more than a house. I'd lose myself. I didn't leave that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the half-packed suitcase, listening to Oliver's soft breathing through the baby monitor. Every time I tried to stand, something stopped me. The memory of our wedding vows, the life I thought we were building. But by morning, that hesitation turned into something else. Resolve. I needed proof. I needed to know if this was just manipulation or a full betrayal. So while Daniel was at work, I started digging. I found a folder in his desk, labeled Finances. Inside were letters, tax forms, and one document that made my chest tighten. A property insurance policy. The owner listed, Margaret Ellison. The occupants, Daniel and Clara Ellison. Not co-owners, just occupants. Then at the bottom of the folder, a printed email chain caught my eye. It was between Daniel and a lawyer. Once your mother's trust finalizes, the property will legally transfer to her estate beneficiaries. Please confirm you're aware this includes your spouse only if explicitly added by amendment. There was no amendment attached. My heart pounded. I scrolled further down. A reply from Daniel. Yes, I understand. My mother wants to keep it in the family. Keep it in the family. But I was his family. Or at least I thought I was. I sank into the chair, feeling the walls close in. Every memory, every family dinner, every smile from Margaret, we're just helping, replayed like a cruel joke. When Daniel came home that evening, I was waiting for him at the kitchen table. The documents were spread out like evidence in a trial. Sit, I said quietly. He froze in the doorway. Clara. Sit. He did. Slowly. I slid the email toward him. You were going to let her take everything, weren't you? His eyes flicked to the paper, then to me. It's not what you think. Oh, really? I snapped, because it looks exactly like you and your mother planned this from the start. You put the house in her name. You let her control the loan, and now you're just waiting for her to die so you can inherit it like a good little son. That's not fair, he said, his voice breaking. You know how hard it was for us to even get approved. I thought this was temporary. Temporary? I laughed bitterly. Daniel, there's a trust. That's not temporary, that's permanent. He ran a hand through his hair, looking like a man unraveling. She said it was just a formality. I didn't want to argue with her anymore. You know how she is, and what about me? I whispered. Didn't I deserve to know I was living in someone else's house? That all of this, the walls, the memories, our son's first steps, belonged to her? He reached across the table. Clara, please. I never meant to hurt you. I pulled my hand back. You didn't just hurt me. You made me feel like I was a guest in my own life. That night, we didn't speak. Daniel slept on the couch. I stayed in the nursery with Oliver, listening to the rain tapping against the window, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. In the morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and there she was, Margaret holding a folder. I think we should talk, she said smoothly. I wanted to slam the door in her face, but curiosity kept me still. About what? The house. She stepped inside, uninvited as always. She sat at the table, opened the folder, and spread out a set of papers. I'm transferring ownership, she said. For a second, I didn't understand. Transferring? To who? To Daniel. I stared at her. Why? She smiled faintly. Because I'm tired of the fighting. And because I want what's best for my son and grandson. Her tone was gentle. Too gentle. The kind of calm that hides something sharp underneath. What's the catch? I asked. She tilted her head as if amused by my suspicion. You'll sign this. She slid another paper toward me, a post-nuptial agreement. I scanned it. My hands went numb halfway through. It stated that in the event of separation or divorce, the house, and any property tied to it, would remain solely Daniel's. So that's it, I said. You're giving him the house, as long as I sign away my rights. Margaret smiled, serene as ever. It's the cleanest way to ensure stability. You'll still have a home, Clara. You just won't have the burden of ownership. The burden, I repeated, my voice trembling. I looked at her, this woman who'd smiled at me during our wedding, who'd rocked my baby to sleep, and saw her for what she truly was, not a mother, not a grandmother, a queen guarding her castle. I pushed the paper back. No. Her expression didn't change. Think carefully. This is your security. No, I said again, louder this time. My security is my own name on a door, my son knowing his mother wasn't a fool. For a brief moment, her eyes flickered, anger breaking through the porcelain mask. You're making a mistake, Clara. Maybe, I said softly, but it'll be my mistake. That night, I packed again, this time without hesitation. I left Daniel a note. You let her own our house. I won't let her own me. I took Oliver, his blanket, and a single photograph, our first family picture before all of this began. I didn't know where I was going, but as I drove through the quiet streets, the weight that had sat on my chest for months began to lift. For the first time, I could breathe. That night, after they left, I stood by the window. The sky was soft pink, the tide rolling in gentle waves. I thought about all the doors I'd walked through, some locked, some slammed, some reopened, and I realized something. Home isn't in the walls. It's in the peace you build after they fall. The sea became my rhythm. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of gulls and waves brushing against the shore, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something bad to happen. I'd make coffee, open the window, and watch Oliver build little castles in the sand. He didn't remember the old house, the one his grandmother once ruled like a queen, and I was grateful for that. To him, this was home. The sound of the ocean, the scent of salt and soap on his pajamas, the laughter that filled the small kitchen as I burned yet another batch of pancakes. Life had finally quieted into something honest. Sometimes I'd still think about Margaret. I'd heard through the grapevine that she wasn't doing well. Her health had declined after the trial, and her social circle had thinned even more. Pride, it turns out, can be a heavy thing to carry alone. One afternoon, months later, I got a letter in the mail. It was her handwriting, delicate, perfect cursive, the kind that made you imagine a woman who'd spent her life controlling every detail, every signature, every story told about her. It read, Clara, I've spent the last months asking myself where everything went wrong. I thought I was protecting my son, keeping control of what I built. But I see now that in trying to hold on to what was mine, I destroyed what could have been ours. You didn't deserve that. Neither did he. I'm sorry. If you're ever willing, I'd like to see my grandson once before it's too late. Margaret. I read that letter 5 times. Each time something different ached. Anger, sadness, compassion. Part of me wanted to tear it up. Another part, the part that had finally learned peace, just folded it neatly and placed it in my drawer. I didn't take Oliver to see her right away, but I didn't throw the letter away either. Some wounds don't heal by reopening them. They heal when you finally stop letting them define the story. Years passed. Oliver grew tall, curious, full of light. Daniel and I kept a respectful distance, civil for our son's sake, but no longer bound by the fragile threads of what could have been. Sometimes I'd see him at school events or birthdays. We'd talk politely, gently, like people who once shared a dream and learned to let it go. He'd tell me his mother asked about Oliver often, though she rarely left the house. I never gave an answer right away. Some days I wanted to protect the peace we'd built. Other days I thought maybe forgiveness didn't mean surrender. Maybe it just meant letting truth breathe without bitterness. It wasn't until the following winter that I decided. Oliver and I went to see her. Her home, my old home, looked smaller than I remembered. The walls that once felt like prison bars now seemed fragile, almost soft with age. She was sitting by the window, wrapped in a blanket, pale but still dignified. When she saw us, her hand trembled. Clara, she whispered, you came. I nodded. We did. Her eyes moved to Oliver, who was hiding half behind my leg. Is that your grandson? I said softly. Yes. She started to cry. Not the loud kind of crying, but the quiet kind that shakes the shoulders and makes you wish you'd done things differently. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I thought control would keep us safe. I sat across from her, and for the first time I saw not a villain, but a woman terrified of losing everything she built. Fear can turn love into something sharp. I took her hand. It's okay. We all did what we thought would keep us safe. She smiled faintly, looking at Oliver again. He has your eyes. We didn't stay long, but when we left, she pressed a small silver key into my palm. The house, she whispered. It's still yours, too. I closed my fingers around it, not because I needed it, but because I knew she needed to give it. When we got home, I hung that key on the wall near the kitchen window, not as a symbol of property, but as a reminder of everything I'd survived: control, betrayal, silence, and finally, peace. Sometimes at night, I sit by the ocean and think about how much energy I spent trying to prove my worth to people who were too afraid to see it. Now I know better. Home isn't what you build for others to admire. It's what you reclaim for yourself. One boundary, one truth, one act of quiet dignity at a time. So if you're listening to my story, maybe you've had your own version of a Margaret. Someone who took what was yours and made you question your strength. And maybe you're sitting there right now wondering if fighting back is worth it. If truth really wins in the end. Let me tell you this: it does. Maybe not in courtrooms or signatures or apologies, but in the peace you find when you stop needing their approval to exist. I built a new home, not out of bricks and paper, but out of honesty, love, and the kind of quiet strength that no one can take away. And when I tuck Oliver into bed at night, I whisper, "This house belongs to kindness," because it does. It always did. Would you have forgiven her? Tell me in the comments, because I'm still wondering if I did the right thing. If you've ever had to rebuild your life after betrayal, you're not alone. Subscribe for more stories like mine. Maybe we'll heal, one truth at a time.